someone says, "Hey, I'm going to go buy a car today," do they sound excited? Or do they sound like they're about to go to the DMV with snacks and worse lighting? Because you know the tone and you see it in people's faces. They're not pumped. It's just something that they have to do. They're starting to prepare for battle. And if you know what I'm talking about, you've seen it over and over and over again. And as a customer, it feels like this. You pull in, you sit in your car for a second. You look at the building and it's like you're about to test yourself out and go through battle. Then you do a little bit of a pep talk. All right, be sharp. Don't say too much. Don't get trapped, and you're going to be just fine. That's not normal. It's not normal for us to do that. It's not normal when you work with companies to have that happen. That's not how it feels, for example, when you walk in the Apple. If you buy something from Nike or even Best Buy, nobody walks in the Best Buy and says, "Hey, stay calm. They're going to get me on the protection plan." But at dealerships, it's a different story. And here's the wild part. That feeling, that tension, that low-level anxiety sitting in your chest when you're about to pull onto the lot, that's not random. It's actually engineered, and it's not by evil people, and it's not by anybody with any sort of bad intentions. But it was designed by a system that was built over 100 years ago, and we never really updated how humans actually want to buy things along the way. So this whole episode summed up in one sentence: the car buying experience didn't evolve around the customer, it evolved around the system. Because the people that build cars almost never sell them. Think about that. If you're buying an iPhone, you're buying it from Apple. You're buying it from the manufacturer. If you buy something from Nike's website, you're buying something from Nike. If you're dealing with somebody when it comes to buying a car, they didn't build it, they didn't design it, they didn't engineer it. Dealerships are this weird middle layer. And there's 17,000 of them across this country, all independently owned, all trying to win and all trying to survive, and all trying to make money inside of the same structure. Now, before you go ahead and say, here we go, Andy's finally lost it and got to the core, it's actually dealers that are the problem. No, just relax, because this is where most people get it wrong. It isn't about blaming people. It's about understanding the environment they're operating inside of. Because once you understand the system, you start to realize something really important. Most of the behaviors that customers hate were created as survival tactics. It's not a strategy, it's just simply survival. Now, let's rewind a little bit. Let's go through a little bit of automotive history, because I promised you that. Late 1800s to the early 1900s, cars were brand new. Nobody knew really what they were doing. There was absolutely no playbook on how this whole thing worked out. And a fun fact, the first dealerships, first one was in Detroit in 1898, and it was an EV dealer. Yeah, have fun with that one. But back then, it was just a bunch of guys building these machines and going, all right, now what? We have this thing, it powers itself, but what do we do with it from here? And the first places that sold cars, they actually weren't even dealerships. They were like bicycle shops and carriage houses and storefronts. And it was kind of like the coming of the pager or the smartphone back in the day. They weren't everywhere at first. But imagine walking in to buy a bike and leaving with something that went 20 miles an hour and scared the living hell out of your neighbors. That was the early days of these things. I mean, the big steam canisters on them just ready to explode. But then this guy named Henry Ford shows up, and Ford, he had a big problem. And it wasn't demand by any stretch of the imagination. People wanted his stuff. It was production. You see, he could build the cars, but he didn't have the money to go ahead and pull this off. He didn't have any retail locations or service centers or sales teams or any of the things that we have today. So he makes this crazy decision and decides to change everything. He says, basically, I build cars, you sell the cars. So these local entrepreneurs stepped up. They started buying inventory, taking the risk upon themselves. They established buildings, they hired people, and just like that, the modern dealership was born. Not as a strategy, but as a workaround to a system that was already pretty much installed around how people work. And like most workarounds, it stuck. And here's where things started to shift, because early on, manufacturers handled all of the power. They could dump inventory onto dealerships, whether they liked it or not. They could force unpopular models on them if it's just what they felt like making that day. They can cancel franchises straight out from underneath you. And dealers, funny enough, were all in on this thing. Building staff, loans, families all tied to this system. So when manufacturers pushed too hard, Dealers, they finally figured out that they could push back. By the 1950s, dealers won, and they won big. Laws were passed across the country that basically stated manufacturers could not compete against their own dealerships. And that's where everything started to lock in because now you don't just have a business model, you have a legal structure. And once something becomes law, it moves slow, really slow. Time's going on and the reputation's starting to build. And let's talk about reputation because nobody just wakes up one morning and says, I'm going to distrust car dealerships today. It just doesn't happen. That has to be built and it has to come from somewhere. So after World War II, demand for automobiles explodes and cars are everywhere. Everybody saw the advantages of having one of these things. Dealers now have the leverage. Then the market flips. Now dealers are squeezed and the whole thing changes behavior. And this is where we get bait and switch ads, confusing pricing, long negotiations, and key hostage situations. And you know what I'm talking about. You walk in, you just a look, and the next thing you know, you're there for 3 hours. Your car is parked somewhere else on the other side of the lot. You have no idea how it got there. And someone says, well, if we get this close, where do you need the payment? And you're sitting there thinking to yourself, I just wanted to look at a car. I really didn't want to do much of anything. But that didn't come from nowhere. It came from pressure, and pressure creates shortcuts. Shortcuts create bad experiences, and bad experiences create reputation in a negative way. And once that reputation is set in negatively, it tends to stick, and it's quite hard to get yourself unburied from that. Fast forward to today. We like to think things are totally different than just shortly after World War II. But if you really look at it, the structure hasn't changed. We're taught in the road to the sale, but we're not actually taught how to sell. So if the structure hasn't changed, we've simply just started layering technology on top of it with the hopes that it'll fix things. Where customers now, they're researching everything. They're comparing pricing, they're looking at reviews from multiple sites on you. They've walked in prepared for once, and you've got customers pulling in that will pull out their phone and they got like 35 tabs open and they're going through cross-examining everything that you say. And then they're saying things to you, the professional, like, hey, I saw this over here. Why is it different? Can you tell me? And now the tension starts to shift. And not that it's going to be any less tension, it's a different tension. And then this crazy thing came along called COVID. And everything breaks. The whole system basically dismantles itself and inventory disappears. Prices go up on everything. Dealers go from please buy a car to if you don't buy it right now, somebody else will. And they were being honest in saying that. So for a minute there, it was just completely wild. But here's what stuck. The profit shifted. The front end gross, it completely collapsed. The money now lives in finance, which means that the most uncomfortable part of the deal never actually went away. You're still sitting in the box. You're still talking numbers. You're still trying to figure out what things are actually going to cost you and whether you just bought a car or just adopted a new payment. And here's the twist on all of this. Customer satisfaction is at an all-time high right now, which sounds absolutely insane compared to everything that I just said. But it actually makes sense. Customers are now doing more online than ever, which means we need to stay on top of our stuff as much as we possibly can. They're spending less time waiting when they come on into the dealerships, and they feel more in control, which is actually a good thing. So the experience to them is starting to feel better. But at the core, it's still the same thing. Negotiation is still the terror of both the consultants and the customer. And the finance pressure is still there, and the confusion's still there. If it's handled wrong, it's like putting a beautiful interface on like Windows XP. It looked great then, but it doesn't look great now. All it's going to do is just beep and take us in the wrong direction. So what do we do with this? Because you're not writing laws today and you're not rebuilding the system, you can't actually participate in changing it. And one of those things that we can do is remove uncertainty from the situation. Because that's really actually the big problem here is customers don't hate buying cars. They really don't. But what they actually hate is not knowing what's about to happen and not trusting what they're hearing and not feeling in control. So if you want to stand out from the rest of everybody else out there, try to stop being slick. It's about clarity. It's about transparency. And it's about confidence and getting the customer feeling motivated. That's the name of the game. The system may be old and the structure may be locked, but the behavior of it all, that's yours. Every interaction that you have, you've got a choice. add pressure, or remove it, add confusion to the situation, or simply eliminate it. Because the dealerships that win moving forward aren't the ones that master the system. They're the ones that make the customer forget that they're even there in the first place. And that is how we change absolutely everything. So if you want to get higher grosses on those deals and get that front end bumped up, figure out what you can do to make that customer happy. Because once anxiety starts to drop, motivation starts to set in. And so this week we've added a new tool that is called the Depressurizer. It has a bunch of scenarios loaded on in that are super common for us to get into. And these will help us understand how to get out of these scenarios while still maintaining the customer's ability to stay happy during the process and stay emotionally motivated. So check it out. The link is down in the show notes. And if you're interested, our app is now live at AutoKnerd.com. And if you want to start taking some independent classes on your own, learn how to make more gross, close more deals, and make yourself more money per month, just go ahead and check it out. AutoKnerd.com. That's AutoKnerd. And this is Andrew Sardone. Have a great week. Keep crushing it.